I'm David Ellis, 42 years old, and I have been a senior account manager at Whitaker Solutions for the past 15 years. When I say senior, it's not just a title. I earned it through consistent performance, thorough preparation, and a level of professionalism that allowed me to manage some of the company's largest and most lucrative accounts. Over the years, I've developed a reputation for reliability and meticulous attention to detail, traits that earned me the trust of both clients and colleagues alike. My role goes beyond just maintaining relationships. I oversee the proprietary client database, a critical asset that supports revenue streams totaling $180 million annually. This Halloween event was supposed to be just another corporate gathering, an opportunity for networking and light-hearted interactions, a momentary break from the usual pressures of quarterly targets and client negotiations. Instead, it became the stage for a calculated professional humiliation that would ultimately set the course for a strategic reckoning. The atmosphere in the event hall was festive but formal. Executives mingling with staff, the CEO delivering a brief speech, and the usual undercurrent of corporate ambition simmering beneath the surface. I arrived in a costume that balanced creativity and professionalism, a nod to my personality without crossing the line into frivolity. I had put thought into it, ensuring it was appropriate, yet memorable. Little did I know that Cameron Whitaker, the CEO's son and a junior executive known for his privileged attitude and reckless confidence, had already set his sights on undermining me publicly. As the evening unfolded, Cameron's gaze locked onto me, and he made his move. In front of a gathering that included upper management and some board members, he openly mocked my costume. His words weren't just casual teasing. They were a deliberate, cutting remark meant to belittle both my appearance and my professional standing. "This is why you'll never make VP," he sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. The laughter that followed from some of his peers only underlined the power dynamics at play, Cameron leveraging his family name and position to intimidate and diminish. But I didn't react with anger or defensiveness. I understood that emotional outbursts in such settings only reinforce the aggressor's narrative and weaken one's own position. Instead, I maintained a calm composure, signaling confidence rather than submission. I smiled, a measured, knowing smile, and then deliberately I removed my Halloween mask. It wasn't just about revealing my face, but about symbolically stripping away any illusion of vulnerability. Walking over to Cameron's desk, I placed my security badge squarely in front of him. A subtle but unmistakable message. The badge represented access, authority, and control, factors he seemed to underestimate. "You have 72 hours before you lose everything," I said quietly yet firmly, ensuring my words would resonate beyond the immediate moment. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just a strategic display of calm and calculated intent. I knew the power dynamics were shifting, even if the room hadn't fully grasped it yet. Cameron's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The message was clear. I wasn't just a passive employee to be mocked or replaced. I was a professional with leverage, armed with documentation, control over critical assets, and a plan that would soon unfold. That Halloween night wasn't about costumes or festivities. It was a professional crossroads, the moment when I silently announced that my expertise and the resources I managed would not be dismissed lightly. The local amusement masked a deeper game of corporate chess, and I was already several moves ahead. Over the course of my 15 years at Whitaker Solutions, I deliberately honed a skill set that went far beyond traditional account management. I came to understand that in today's corporate environment, especially in a company like ours where revenue streams are tightly linked to long-term client trust and proprietary systems, success demands both relational finesse and technical mastery. Early on, I realized that managing our largest accounts, those responsible for an astonishing $180 million in annual revenue, required more than just client meetings and follow-ups. It demanded a deep integration with the company's data infrastructure, contract nuances, and strategic foresight. From my first promotion from account representative to account manager, I took it upon myself to learn every detail about our client database, the proprietary system that tracked not only client interactions, but also contract terms, renewal timelines, billing histories, and service-level agreements. This database was the nerve center of Whitaker Solutions' client management and revenue assurance. Losing access or control to it would be akin to severing the company's lifeline to its most valuable customers. Recognizing that risk early, I volunteered to become its primary steward, overseeing the integrity, security, and updates of the system alongside our IT department. This dual role, combining client liaison duties with data stewardship, became my unique professional niche. My approach has always been methodical and documentation-driven. Every client conversation, contract revision, and strategic decision was logged meticulously. Meeting notes were always promptly written and archived, with key points highlighted and action items assigned clear deadlines. Contract versions were cross-referenced with client correspondence to ensure alignment and to preempt potential disputes. This discipline not only ensured smooth account transitions and renewals, but also created an audit trail that proved invaluable in complex negotiations or compliance reviews. Over time, clients came to trust not only my personal professionalism, but also the reliability of the entire management process I administered. Promotion paths within Whitaker Solutions were competitive, yet my consistent delivery and attention to detail earned me steady advancement, from senior account manager to a trusted advisor role within the company. Colleagues often consulted me on both client strategy and database functionality, acknowledging that I was the gatekeeper no one else could effectively replace overnight. This made me a key node in the company's operational network, especially given that the client portfolio under my care accounted for roughly 1/3 of the company's total revenue. However, this indispensability also painted a target on my back. Cameron Whitaker's emerging influence within the company coincided with a push to consolidate power and reduce costs. His strategy to replace seasoned managers like me with junior executives overlooked the depth of relationships and the critical data systems underpinning our success. They underestimated how client revenue depended not just on face-to-face interactions, but on carefully managed contracts, compliance standards, and the seamless operation of proprietary databases, all of which I controlled. I also maintained a professional network within the company, nurturing relationships with key stakeholders in legal, finance, and IT departments. This cross-functional collaboration proved essential for maintaining the robustness of our client management processes. For example, when contract renewals approached, I coordinated with legal to ensure compliance with evolving regulations and with finance to forecast revenue impacts accurately. This interdisciplinary coordination was part of why I was viewed not merely as an account manager, but as a strategic asset. To summarize, my value to Whitaker Solutions stemmed from a combination of deep client knowledge, exclusive control over the proprietary client database, rigorous documentation practices, and a networked approach to managing contractual and operational complexities. This professional profile made me integral to the company's ongoing revenue generation and a formidable presence within internal power dynamics. It was precisely this role, quiet yet indispensable, that triggered the challenge from Cameron Whitaker, setting the stage for the conflict that would unfold. Cameron Whitaker was, without a doubt, a force shaped by privilege and impatience. At 28 years old, he held the title of Junior Executive at Whitaker Solutions, a position largely secured through his lineage as the CEO's son, rather than through a measured career trajectory or demonstrated expertise. From the outset, Cameron's ambitions were clear: to rapidly consolidate power within the company and secure a prominent executive role before his age or experience could be legitimately questioned. The board and shareholders, under increasing pressure to maximize profits and streamline operations, unwittingly enabled his aggressive approach. The underlying assumption seemed to be that Cameron's bloodline guaranteed effective leadership, even if his managerial skills were still in their infancy. The reality, however, was that Cameron's drive for quick ascension translated into a reckless disregard for established protocols and operational subtleties, especially concerning individuals like myself, whose deep institutional knowledge and control over critical assets were not easily replicated or replaced. Cameron's strategic priority was clear: drive costs down immediately by replacing veteran managers with junior staff who commanded substantially lower salaries and were perceived by him as more malleable. This view was dangerously simplistic, ignoring the nuances of client relationships and the technical infrastructure that supported them. What Cameron fundamentally failed to grasp was the exclusivity of my role in managing and safeguarding the proprietary client database. This wasn't just a repository of contact details or billing information. It was the company's operational backbone for $180 million in annual revenue. The system architecture was complex, integrated tightly with contract management, compliance monitoring, and real-time client engagement tracking. Only I had the comprehensive understanding required to maintain its integrity and ensure uninterrupted service. Beyond that, my employment contract contained carefully negotiated clauses that Cameron either overlooked or deliberately ignored. Among these was a non-compete clause tied directly to the severance package, an enforceable legal protection designed to safeguard both my professional interests and the company's data security. The severance agreement stipulated that payment was contingent on my continued control over client revenue streams and database access until an orderly transition could occur. Cameron's move to onboard a junior replacement without my involvement was not only premature but in direct violation of these contractual terms. In addition to the legal framework, Cameron grossly underestimated the technical dependencies embedded within the system's architecture, dependencies that required my authorization and knowledge to operate effectively. The internal IT team, while competent in routine maintenance, lacked the specialized training and contextual awareness that my position demanded. This created a vulnerability that Cameron's cost-cutting zeal ignored. Disrupting my access wasn't a simple procedural matter, but a potential trigger for operational risk and revenue loss. Recognizing these factors, I reached out to Laura Benton, an employment lawyer with a strong reputation in corporate labor law and contract disputes. Laura quickly became a critical ally, helping me interpret the fine print of my contract and assess the legal implications of Cameron's unilateral actions. Our early discussions centered on identifying leverage points within the company's policies, contract law, and regulatory frameworks. Laura's expertise gave me confidence that the protections embedded in my contract were not merely theoretical, but actionable. Meanwhile, Cameron's approach reflected a broader corporate culture shift at Whitaker Solutions, a shift prioritizing rapid cost reduction and power centralization over experience and deep operational knowledge. His dismissal of seasoned managers was framed as a necessary evolution, but the tactical oversight was glaring. Client trust, contract compliance, and system integrity could not be maintained by novices or sidelined experts. Cameron's impatience and hubris blinded him to the risks of destabilizing a well-oiled client management ecosystem. In summary, Cameron's motivation stemmed from a desire to fast-track his career by consolidating authority and dismissing established professionals as obstacles. However, this ambition was built on a flawed understanding of the company's operational complexity and the legal protections underpinning employee roles like mine. His critical oversight, underestimating my exclusive control over the client database, ignoring contractual rights, and disregarding system dependencies, would soon become the fulcrum of a strategic response that shifted the balance of power in this unfolding corporate confrontation. After the unsettling confrontation at the Halloween event, I immediately turned my focus inward, determined to assess the full scope of Cameron's moves against me with a clear, professional eye. The first document I pulled up was the official termination notice delivered via email that same evening. Reading it closely, I noted the language carefully, formal yet deliberately vague, citing organizational restructuring as the reason. What caught my attention was the absence of any mention of transition planning or handover procedures, which in my experience was standard protocol whenever a senior account manager was being replaced. This omission hinted at a unilateral, perhaps rushed decision intended to marginalize me completely. Digging deeper, I requested from Human Resources the internal communications related to my role change, particularly any emails or memos regarding onboarding a replacement. What I uncovered confirmed my initial suspicions. Cameron had instructed the HR and IT departments to expedite the recruitment and system access provisioning for a junior executive without consulting me or including me in any handover discussions. This was not just a breach of courtesy. It was a strategic exclusion designed to isolate me professionally while stripping me of my operational relevance. The next step was to re-examine my employment contract line by line, paying particular attention to provisions about severance, non-compete agreements, and data ownership. I had retained a meticulously organized digital folder containing every signed iteration of my contract and related addendums, along with annotated notes from previous discussions with legal counsel. This thorough documentation was the product of years spent anticipating and mitigating the risks of corporate shifts and power plays. Among the clauses, one stood out as my strongest legal anchor. The severance package was explicitly conditional upon the company maintaining uninterrupted client revenue streams tied to my accounts until an orderly transition could be completed. More so, the non-compete clause was activated only upon full severance payment, which Cameron's attempt to prematurely remove me risked negating. Crucially, the contract also asserted my ownership stake, or at least custodial control, over the proprietary client database, and stipulated that no transfer of access could occur without my direct authorization or a formal transition process overseen jointly by senior management and legal teams. I cross-referenced these contractual elements with email threads between Cameron and the IT department that I had managed to archive during previous projects. In one message dated just 2 days prior, Cameron had ordered an immediate revocation of my system access credentials, citing security protocol. However, this directive was issued without prior notification to me or compliance with corporate policy that mandated a risk assessment and transition plan for critical system users. This unilateral command not only violated internal IT governance, but potentially opened the company to operational disruptions and legal liabilities. Mapping out these violations, I mentally outlined the leverage points I could exploit. Cameron's disregard for contractual severance protections, his premature and unauthorized attempt to revoke system access, and the high-risk operational exposure created by sidelining the only person fully versed in the integrated database architecture. The stakes were clear. Disruptions here could jeopardize $180 million in revenue and expose the company to regulatory scrutiny due to breaches of compliance standards tied to client contract management. Further, I reached out to trusted colleagues in IT and legal departments to confirm the system's fragility and the procedural irregularities involved. Their quiet affirmations reinforced my position. Cameron's moves were amateurish and dangerously short-sighted. The internal IT team, while competent in routine maintenance, lacked the nuanced expertise and historical knowledge that I alone possessed. Any uncoordinated access changes threatened data integrity and client service continuity. Simultaneously, I prepared a detailed timeline of events, documenting every communication, contract clause, and procedural breach I identified. This timeline would serve as a foundational piece of evidence, crucial for any legal consultation or regulatory complaint. The clarity of this documentation would counter any attempt by Cameron or the company to claim ignorance or procedural compliance. Throughout this process, I maintained a strategic calm, knowing that haste or emotional reaction could compromise the strength of my position. The objective was not confrontation, but establishing a legally and operationally sound foundation from which to negotiate or enforce my rights. I recognized that Cameron's underestimation of my role and the protections embedded in my contract were his critical vulnerability. My task was to transform this oversight into professional leverage. In parallel, I re-engaged Laura Benton, my employment lawyer, sharing the detailed findings and contractual interpretations. Our combined assessment confirmed that Cameron's actions constituted clear breaches of contract and corporate governance policies, creating grounds for formal grievance and potential regulatory action. We began outlining a measured response, poised to hold the company accountable without prematurely revealing our hand. By the end of this analytical phase, the picture was unmistakable. Cameron had acted recklessly, disregarding not only the legal safeguards protecting my position, but also the operational realities of the client database dependencies. It was a calculated exclusion, but one that underestimated the systemic importance of my role and the contractual architecture safeguarding it. This realization marked a turning point, setting the stage for a professional and legal challenge that I would soon unfold with precise timing and unyielding documentation. Immediately following my review of Cameron's unauthorized moves and the contractual protections I held, I scheduled a consultation with Laura Benton, a seasoned employment lawyer known for her expertise in contract disputes and corporate governance. I knew that to counteract Cameron's reckless attempt to sideline me, I needed not just legal insight, but a trusted partner capable of navigating the complex intersection of employment law, data security, and corporate policy. The timing was critical. Every hour counted in preserving my professional leverage and protecting the $180 million revenue stream linked directly to my accounts. Before our meeting, I methodically organized all relevant documentation into a comprehensive chronological portfolio. This included every client contract associated with my accounts, meticulously annotated with renewal dates, severance triggers, and non-compete stipulations. I created a separate folder for email correspondences, internal and external, highlighting communications involving Cameron's directives, IT access logs, and HR notices. Each email was timestamped and cross-referenced to contractual clauses or company policies, ensuring traceability and evidentiary integrity. Next, I compiled detailed system access records from the IT department, which documented every login, modification, and attempt at credential revocation related to the client database. These logs were crucial because they revealed the exact timing and scope of Cameron's attempts to cut off my access, efforts that were premature and in violation of both corporate policy and contractual obligations. Having these records in hand fortified my position by substantiating my claims with hard data rather than relying solely on verbal assertions. In addition, I gathered technical diagrams and architecture descriptions of the proprietary client database system, emphasizing the exclusive dependencies that only I fully understood. This documentation included system workflows, permission hierarchies, and backup protocols. The goal was to demonstrate that any abrupt change in access or management without my involvement risked data corruption, service interruptions, and ultimately, significant financial losses for Whitaker Solutions. I knew this technical evidence would be indispensable in legal and regulatory discussions. Recognizing the value of witness corroboration, I discreetly reached out to select colleagues in IT and client services who were aware of the protocols surrounding my role and Cameron's recent unauthorized instructions. I requested written statements confirming their observations of the procedural irregularities and the potential operational impact of excluding me from the transition. Their willing cooperation added a layer of credibility and demonstrated that my concerns were shared by others within the company's operational framework. When Laura and I convened, I presented this meticulously organized dossier. Our discussion was precise and analytical, focusing on identifying and quantifying the contractual violations as well as the operational risks. Laura's legal expertise enabled us to pinpoint the clauses in my employment contract that Cameron had breached and to assess the enforceability of severance and non-compete provisions under these circumstances. We also evaluated the potential regulatory infractions stemming from IT access mismanagement and failure to comply with data governance standards. Throughout our consultation, I emphasized the strategic nature of our response. The objective was not to initiate an impulsive conflict, but to establish a solid foundation for leverage based on evidence and contractual rights. Laura and I mapped out a timeline for formal actions, considering both internal grievance procedures and external regulatory avenues. We agreed on the imperative to maintain professionalism in all communications, ensuring that every interaction was documented and legally vetted to prevent any counterclaims or misrepresentations. My internal monologue during this phase was focused and methodical. They have overlooked the critical fact that severance payments, and thus the activation of non-compete clauses, are contingent on uninterrupted client revenue flow, which I alone manage. Prematurely cutting off my access not only violates our contract, but jeopardizes the company's financial stability. This is the leverage point I must exploit. This clarity of purpose kept my demeanor calm and my actions calculated. To solidify the plan, I also arranged for an immediate, complete backup of the client database under my control. This measure ensured that I possessed an immutable copy of the data, safeguarding against any attempts to alter or restrict access without proper authorization. The backup was stored securely with encrypted credentials, accessible only by me and my legal counsel, further reinforcing my professional custody over this critical asset. By the end of this strategic planning phase, every element was in place. A detailed chronological compendium of contracts and communications, system access logs and technical diagrams, corroborating witness statements, a secure backup of proprietary data, and a clear legal strategy formulated with Laura Benton. This foundation would enable me to respond decisively to Cameron's actions, shifting the balance of power through documented evidence, contractual enforcement, and measured legal pressure. The groundwork was laid for a calculated professional challenge, one that relied on systematic preparation rather than emotional reaction. With all pieces aligned, I was ready to transition from assessment to action, confident that every step was supported by rigorous documentation and legal prudence. The clock was ticking, but my approach ensured that when I moved it would be with unassailable authority. Laura and I took a methodical approach to building a comprehensive legal and professional case against the actions Cameron Whitaker had taken. From the very start, it was clear this wouldn't be a simple dispute resolved by informal talks or vague threats. It required an ironclad foundation of evidence, drawing from contracts, communications, technical documentation, and financial data, all aligned to demonstrate not only the breaches of my employment agreement, but also the operational risks Cameron's unilateral decisions had triggered. Our first step was a deep dive into the contractual landscape. I provided Laura with every version of my employment contract, including the original signed agreement and all subsequent addendums that addressed severance terms, non-compete clauses, and data ownership rights. These documents were annotated meticulously with notes from previous legal consultations, highlighting language that protected my severance package, specifically contingent on maintaining uninterrupted client revenue, a crucial safeguard in the event of termination or restructuring. The non-compete clause was particularly important. It stipulated that this restriction would only activate upon the full payment of the severance package. Cameron's premature attempts to exclude me from access and transition discussions threatened to nullify that payment entirely, effectively voiding the legal protections it afforded me. This contractual nuance became a central pillar of our argument. By undermining my severance conditions, Cameron risked triggering the non-compete clause early, which could unjustly restrict my future employment opportunities and damage my professional reputation. Parallel to contractual review, Laura and I scrutinized internal email chains that documented Cameron's instructions to IT and HR. These emails, time-stamped and cross-referenced with company policies, revealed a clear pattern of disregard for proper authorization procedures, namely, Cameron's directive to immediately revoke my system access without oversight or risk assessment. This was not only a contract violation, but a breach of corporate governance, infringing on IT security protocols and exposing the company to operational disruption. Laura emphasized how these communications would be pivotal in demonstrating intent and procedural violations to regulators and in court. Equally critical were the technical documents I assembled. These included system architecture diagrams, permission hierarchies, and workflow charts for the proprietary client database under my custodianship. This database controlled the billing, contract renewals, and service-level agreements for $180 million in annual revenue. Only I possessed the extensive contextual knowledge to manage its integrity, and the sudden removal of my access posed a material risk of data corruption, service interruptions, and client dissatisfaction. Laura and I agreed that illustrating this unique dependency would underscore the reckless nature of Cameron's actions and their potential financial impact on Whitaker Solutions. To strengthen the factual basis of our claims, I reached out to trusted colleagues in IT and client services, discreetly soliciting written statements about the procedural irregularities and the operational consequences they foresaw. These corroborations reinforced our position from multiple internal angles, showing that Cameron's directives were not isolated missteps, but indicative of a broader pattern of mismanagement and disregard for company policies. Their endorsements added credibility and demonstrated that the risk extended beyond internal politics to tangible business vulnerabilities. We also compiled detailed financial reports confirming the scale of revenue tied to my accounts. These reports quantified the risk exposure, caused by the unauthorized system access changes, emphasizing that any disruption could jeopardize multi-million-dollar contracts and revenue continuity. This economic dimension was essential to highlight, reinforcing that the issue transcended personal disputes and threatened shareholder value and regulatory compliance. Laura and I then mapped out the various legal violations exposed by our assembled evidence: breach of contract due to severance interference, tortious interference with business relations through unauthorized client contact and system lockout, and probable violations of data governance and IT security regulations. We identified relevant statutes and regulatory bodies with jurisdiction over each issue, preparing a multi-pronged strategy that combined internal grievance procedures, regulatory complaints to bodies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, and potential litigation. Every piece of evidence was catalogued meticulously to ensure chain of custody and evidentiary integrity, anticipating potential challenges from Whitaker Solutions' legal team. Our documentation protocols followed legal standards for admissible electronic evidence, authenticating emails via headers, preserving metadata on system logs, and securing witness statements with signed declarations. Throughout this process, Laura stressed the importance of measured communication. We crafted carefully worded correspondence to the company, warning of impending legal action without divulging full details prematurely. The tone was professional and assertive, designed to maintain leverage while signaling readiness to escalate if necessary. By the end of this phase, our case was not just a collection of documents, but a coherent, interlocking narrative showing how Cameron's reckless actions violated contracts, endangered a vital $180 million revenue stream, and exposed Whitaker Solutions to regulatory and financial peril. This comprehensive dossier provided the foundation for the next stage of strategic pressure, formal legal notices, and controlled disclosure to key stakeholders. In my mind, I remained focused on the precision and discipline of our approach. This was not a reaction born of anger, but a calculated exercise in professional accountability and legal rigor. Every contract clause, every email thread, every technical diagram, and every financial report was a strategic asset, poised to shift the balance of power in a high-stakes corporate confrontation. After finalizing our comprehensive case file, Laura and I moved decisively to the next phase, issuing formal legal notice to Whitaker Solutions. The objective was clear: demand immediate restoration of my severance rights and full uninterrupted access to the proprietary client database. This step was not merely a request, but a calculated assertion of contractual enforcement, backed by documented evidence and a clear warning of impending regulatory escalation. I drafted the notice with precision, ensuring that the language was firm yet professional. Each demand referenced specific clauses from my employment contract, highlighting the severance package's conditionality on continued client revenue management, which, as the custodial gatekeeper, I exclusively controlled. The notice cited Cameron Whitaker's unauthorized instructions to revoke my system access as a direct violation of these provisions and corporate IT governance policies. In parallel, the letter detailed the operational risks posed by the unilateral access revocation, potential data integrity breaches, service interruptions affecting accounts generating $180 million annually, and consequent financial and reputational damages to the company. By outlining these tangible risks, the communication underscored that this was not a mere internal personnel dispute, but an issue with significant business impact and regulatory implications. Crucially, the notice served as a formal prelude to regulatory complaints. I informed the company that failure to comply within a strict 72-hour window would compel me to initiate proceedings with the Securities and Exchange Commission and local labor boards. This deadline was deliberately set to balance urgency with professionalism, signaling readiness to escalate while leaving room for corrective action. Simultaneously, I took strategic steps to manage external perceptions and client relationships delicately. Privately, I alerted select key clients, those most heavily invested in the accounts under my management, to potential disruptions stemming from internal management changes. My communication was carefully crafted, emphasizing continuity and my commitment to their interests while transparently acknowledging internal transitions. The goal was to maintain trust without inciting panic or undermining Whitaker Solutions' standing. In this outreach, I maintained strict professionalism, framing the message around service assurance and contingency planning. I reassured clients that any operational irregularities would be promptly addressed and that I remained personally engaged with their accounts. This approach forestalled client defections and positioned me as a stable point of contact amid corporate turbulence. Throughout this period, all correspondence, legal notices, client communications, and internal queries were meticulously logged. Each email, call, and meeting was recorded with timestamps and summaries, creating an audit trail that reinforced the credibility and transparency of my actions. This documentation would prove invaluable in any subsequent legal proceedings or regulatory reviews. Meanwhile, Cameron Whitaker remained publicly unaware of the full scope of my preparations and intentions. His overconfidence, bolstered by his familial ties and recent mockery at the Halloween event, left him vulnerable to the unfolding professional challenge. Behind the scenes, however, the groundwork for a systematic corporate reckoning was firmly in place. Aware of the possibility that Cameron or Whitaker Solutions might attempt retaliatory maneuvers, I also secured a consulting agreement with a competing firm. This contingency provided a backup career path and underscored my readiness to transition if negotiations failed. Importantly, this agreement was structured to comply with the non-compete clauses, avoiding any breach of contractual obligations. Throughout this phase, my internal focus remained on disciplined patience and strategic timing. I understood that the leverage I had painstakingly assembled needed to be deployed with calculated restraint. Hastiness or emotional reactions could compromise legal standing or professional reputation. Instead, I maintained a calm, measured posture, asserting rights firmly, but without provocation. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Every element, legal notice, client communications, evidence documentation, contingency planning, was aligned to exert maximum professional pressure within a framework of procedural integrity. The stage was set for the next critical moves in this strategic confrontation, with the clock ticking steadily toward decisive consequences. Within the first 24 hours, after serving my formal legal notice and initiating client alerts, the repercussions of Cameron's premature and unauthorized actions began to manifest with remarkable clarity. The IT department, caught off guard by the sudden need to maintain system operations without my direct involvement, started reporting multiple failures and inconsistencies in the client database. These weren't minor glitches. They were systemic disruptions that hindered the company's ability to process critical contract renewals, billing cycles, and service-level updates, core functions that I had maintained with precision for over a decade. I received corroborating reports from trusted colleagues in IT who confirmed that their team lacked the necessary clearance and contextual knowledge to resolve these issues promptly. System access logs showed repeated failed attempts to modify permissions and troubleshoot errors without my credentials, highlighting the operational risk Cameron's unilateral directive had introduced. These failures not only jeopardized data integrity, but also exposed Whitaker Solutions to potential breaches of contractual service guarantees with clients, a serious compliance concern. Simultaneously, several of the company's largest clients, those accounting for a significant portion of that $180 million annual revenue, reached out directly to my personal contacts within their organizations, expressing unease about service interruptions and delays in contract processing. The timing was no coincidence. The clients had historically relied on my consistent communication and oversight to manage complex contractual details and anticipate renewal timelines. Their inquiries were professional but urgent, focused on clarifying the continuity of service and ensuring that contractual obligations would be met despite apparent internal upheaval. In my communications with these clients, I maintained an unwavering tone of professionalism and reassurance. I acknowledged the internal transitions openly, emphasizing that I was actively engaged in resolving any potential disruptions and that their interests remained my priority. Rather than incite alarm, my transparent yet measured responses fortified client trust, demonstrating that while the company's internal landscape was shifting, the commitment to service excellence and contractual fidelity remained intact, at least insofar as I controlled access and oversight. Meanwhile, on the regulatory front, the formal complaints Laura and I filed began to generate responses. Within this initial 24-hour window, I received acknowledgements from both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the local Labour Board confirming receipt of our submissions. These acknowledgements, standard procedural notifications, nevertheless marked the commencement of official inquiries that would scrutinize Whitaker Solutions' adherence to contract law, data governance standards, and employee protections. This external pressure added a new dimension to the unfolding scenario, one that Cameron had not anticipated and for which he was unprepared. Despite mounting operational and legal pressures, Cameron Whitaker remained publicly confident, seemingly underestimating the gravity of the situation. His attempts to contact me for assistance were met with steady, professional refusals. Each time he called or emailed, I directed him to communicate exclusively through my legal counsel, ensuring that I maintained control over the dialogue and avoided any informal commitments or emotional reactions. I was careful to keep all correspondence recorded and archived, preserving a clear audit trail to support potential litigation or regulatory proceedings. This disciplined approach served multiple strategic purposes. It reinforced the legitimacy of my claims and conveyed a firm boundary that Cameron, despite his status and familial influence, was not in control of the operational realities or legal framework governing my role. It also prevented him from exploiting informal communications to undermine my position or create confusion among stakeholders. As these events unfolded, I remained acutely aware that the operational issues and client concerns were tangible manifestations of the vulnerabilities created by Cameron's mismanagement. The disruption wasn't hypothetical. It was a clear and present risk to the company's multi-million-dollar revenue stream, the integrity of client contracts, and Whitaker Solutions' reputation. This convergence of technical failure, client unease, and regulatory scrutiny set the stage for escalating consequences. At the same time, I continued to monitor IT system logs remotely, verifying that attempts to regain control or patch errors without my involvement were ineffective or counterproductive. I coordinated quietly with select IT colleagues who confirmed that the exclusive dependencies embedded in the client database system made an immediate and orderly transition impossible without my participation. These insights further validated the legal and operational leverage Laura and I had identified. Throughout this critical initial phase, my internal monologue remained focused on maintaining professional composure and strategic patience. I reminded myself that every disruption, inquiry, and client interaction was a calculated step in a broader plan built on contractual rights and documented evidence. My role was not to escalate emotionally or retaliate impulsively, but to let the system I controlled expose the flaws in Cameron's approach and force the company toward accountability. With the 72-hour deadline steadily approaching, these first consequences underscored the urgency and effectiveness of the strategy. Cameron's overconfidence was visibly eroding as he confronted operational failures he neither fully understood nor could manage. The professional leverage I had established was no longer theoretical. It was playing out in real time across multiple fronts: technical, legal, and client relations. The momentum was shifting, but the outcome remained to be determined in the critical hours ahead. As the pressure mounted, multiple fronts converged with relentless force, transforming what had been a quietly building strategic challenge into a full-scale professional confrontation. The foundation Laura and I had meticulously constructed, the contracts, emails, system documentation, and financial data, soon became the cornerstone of a formal lawsuit. This wasn't merely a dispute over access or severance. It was a carefully articulated claim, alleging breach of contract and tortious interference with business relations. The evidence was overwhelming. Our case clearly demonstrated how Cameron Whitaker's unauthorized actions had violated specific contractual provisions that protected severance payments contingent on uninterrupted client revenue management, revenue streams that only I controlled. The legal team we assembled, guided by Laura's expertise, filed the complaint with precise references to contractual language, accompanied by detailed exhibits. The email correspondence instructing the premature revocation of my system access, IT logs confirming the discontinuity in database permissions, and technical diagrams showing the singular dependencies embedded in the proprietary client management system. Each piece fit together to outline a narrative of reckless disregard by Cameron, exposing Whitaker Solutions to considerable financial and reputational risk. Concurrently, regulatory bodies entered the fray. Our formal complaints to the Securities and Exchange Commission and local labor boards triggered official inquiries. The SEC, in particular, initiated an investigation into potential violations of corporate governance and data security regulations. Their interest centered on whether Whitaker Solutions had failed to maintain internal controls over critical client data, and if Cameron's unilateral decisions threatened the integrity of contractual obligations tied to multi-million-dollar revenue. Early communications from the SEC confirmed that they were gathering documents and interviewing staff, including IT personnel and compliance officers, to assess the scope of governance lapses. This regulatory scrutiny intensified the stakes, signaling that the company's challenges were no longer internal HR matters, but issues with potential public and financial consequences. Amid these developments, several of my key clients grew increasingly anxious. They had begun requesting formal reassurances about service continuity and contract fulfillment. These inquiries were professional but persistent, reflecting understandable concern over the disruptions in client database access and contract management. Knowing the importance of maintaining client trust, I engaged with them carefully, providing transparent updates within the bounds of confidentiality and company policy. I emphasized that while internal changes were underway, I personally remained committed to safeguarding their interests and ensuring contractual adherence. This steady communication helped mitigate immediate client defections, but underscored the fragility of the situation from Whitaker Solutions' perspective. Meanwhile, Cameron's position deteriorated rapidly. His initial confidence gave way to a series of increasingly urgent attempts to resolve operational failures and legal challenges. Calls and emails from him seeking my assistance or informal negotiation were met with calm professionalism but firm boundaries. I directed all communication to my legal counsel, ensuring that no informal commitments or concessions could be implied. Each interaction was logged meticulously, preserving a complete audit trail of his overtures and my responses. This approach reinforced the message that the dispute was now firmly in the realm of legal and professional accountability rather than personal negotiation. Behind the scenes, technical audits were underway. Independent IT experts, engaged by the company's legal team at my suggestion, scrutinized the proprietary client database system and confirmed the unique operational dependencies I had highlighted. Their findings validated our argument that abrupt access revocation without an orderly transition posed severe risks of data corruption, billing errors, and service interruptions. These expert reports strengthened the legal position by aligning technical realities with contractual obligations, leaving Whitaker Solutions little room for defense. In response to the mounting pressures, Cameron proposed settlement discussions and offered to reinstate my access and severance rights conditionally. However, our position remained strategically firm. I communicated through Laura that any negotiations would proceed only on the basis of full contractual compliance and appropriate compensation, with no room for partial or informal arrangements. The leverage we held was decisive, grounded not in emotion but in documented evidence and legal enforceability. Throughout this critical period, my internal focus was unwavering. The convergence of legal action, regulatory inquiry, client concerns, and technical validation formed a multidimensional pressure matrix that underscored the consequences of Cameron's reckless decisions. The professional leverage I had built was not just theoretical. It was actively reshaping the company's operational reality and governance landscape. The situation remained fluid and complex, with significant implications yet unresolved. Cameron's attempts to regain control faced mounting obstacles, while Whitaker Solutions grappled with a growing crisis that threatened shareholder confidence and corporate reputation. My role as both challenger and custodian of critical assets placed me at the nexus of this unfolding reckoning, one where precision, patience, and professional rigor continued to define every step forward. As the legal and operational pressures intensified, the inevitable corporate reckoning began to unfold with unmistakable force. Within days, Cameron Whitaker was formally removed from his position as junior executive, pending a comprehensive internal investigation. The board, previously hesitant to challenge the CEO's son, recognized that Cameron's reckless actions had precipitated a crisis far beyond a typical personnel dispute. This removal sent a clear signal throughout Whitaker Solutions. Organizational accountability would no longer be sacrificed on the altar of nepotism or unchecked ambition. From the company's perspective, the consequences were mounting rapidly. Regulatory bodies, spurred by the formal complaints Laura and I filed, were gearing up for rigorous scrutiny. The Securities and Exchange Commission had escalated its inquiry into Whitaker Solutions' governance practices, focusing intently on the failure to maintain adequate internal controls over client data and contractual compliance. Preliminary estimates projected that potential fines and penalties could reach as high as $50 million, a figure not taken lightly by senior leadership given its direct impact on shareholder value and market reputation. Shareholders reacted swiftly to the unfolding scandal. Emergency meetings were convened to address the damage and to formulate a strategy aimed at damage control and restoring investor confidence. The company's stock price experienced significant volatility, dropping sharply as news of the internal investigation and regulatory probes became public knowledge. This market response underscored the tangible financial consequences tied intimately to Cameron's mismanagement and the resulting operational disruptions affecting the $180 million client revenue stream under my management. Simultaneously, several major clients began formal negotiations to reassess or renegotiate contracts with Whitaker Solutions. Their concerns centered not only on the recent service interruptions, but also on the company's apparent governance lapses and leadership instability. These clients represented a substantial portion of the company's revenue base, and their wavering commitment signaled a critical threat to the company's financial health. In discreet conversations, client representatives expressed frustration over the breakdown in continuity and cited the risks introduced by the hasty management changes Cameron had pushed. Beyond client concerns, the growing public exposure of the situation attracted media attention. Corporate governance watchdogs and industry analysts published detailed reports highlighting the systemic failures at Whitaker Solutions. Articles dissected the corporate culture that had enabled Cameron's unchecked authority, framing the episode as a cautionary tale about nepotism and the dangers of sidelining experienced professionals. This negative press further eroded the company's standing in the eyes of investors, clients, and potential talent. Moreover, the internal environment within Whitaker Solutions became increasingly unsettled. Whistleblowers from various departments stepped forward, bringing additional issues into the light, ranging from procedural irregularities to ethical lapses in management decisions unrelated to my case. These revelations compounded the company's challenges, prompting more extensive audits and leadership reviews. The cumulative effect was a palpable decline in employee morale and trust, complicating efforts to stabilize operations during the crisis. Cameron's personal and professional prospects suffered correspondingly. His removal triggered intense scrutiny, including investigations into his prior decisions and financial dealings connected to the company. Shareholder lawsuits explicitly named him, alleging negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. His position within the industry became untenable as reputational damage spread. Potential future roles in executive leadership were jeopardized, and his personal assets faced examination as part of the legal fallout. From my vantage point, the situation underscored the efficacy of a measured, evidence-based approach to professional justice. The $180 million client revenue stream remained unstable and at risk, but the leverage created through comprehensive documentation, legal strategy, and operational control had forced substantial consequences on the company and those responsible. Whitaker Solutions was compelled into emergency restructuring discussions, with leadership acknowledging the need to recalibrate governance practices and restore client trust. Yet, despite the escalating pressures and visible fallout, the situation was far from resolved. Cameron's removal marked a pivotal juncture but not an endpoint. The company faced ongoing regulatory challenges, shareholder demands, and client retention battles that would extend over months. Internally, rebuilding trust and operational stability required sustained effort and strategic oversight. roles I was uniquely positioned to influence, given my expertise and the custody of critical systems. Throughout this phase, I maintained a disciplined professionalism, recognizing that the unfolding consequences, while significant, were part of a broader process of accountability and reform. My role was not to revel in Cameron's downfall, but to ensure that the protections afforded by my contract and my stewardship of the client database translated into concrete, enforceable outcomes benefiting all parties committed to the company's sustainable success. The complexity of this stage required continued vigilance and strategic engagement. The challenges facing Whittaker Solutions were multidimensional: legal, financial, operational, and reputational, and the path forward necessitated careful navigation, informed by the same rigor and documentation that had underpinned my approach from the outset. The professional reckoning triggered by Cameron's miscalculations had set in motion a transformative process, the full implications of which were still unfolding as the company sought to regain stability amid profound disruption. The court ruling in my favor marked a critical turning point, yet it was part of a larger, ongoing professional and corporate reckoning. After months of litigation and regulatory scrutiny, the judgment awarded me $12 million, encompassing severance pay, damages for breach of contract, and full coverage of legal fees. The detailed court opinion referenced the exhaustive documentation and evidence we had compiled, the contracts with explicit severance conditions, the email threads exposing unauthorized access revocation, the IT logs confirming operational dependency on my custody, and the financial reports that quantified the $180 million annual revenue at risk. The judge emphasized that my role was not only contractually protected, but integral to the company's core business function, and Cameron Whittaker's reckless disregard had caused material harm, deserving substantial compensation. Simultaneously, regulatory bodies delivered their verdicts. The Securities and Exchange Commission imposed fines totaling $50 million on Whittaker Solutions for violations of internal controls, data governance lapses, and failure to comply with corporate governance standards. The penalty reflected the severity of the risks created by Cameron's unilateral actions, which undermined shareholder protections and exposed the company to operational disruption. These regulatory sanctions sent a clear message to the company's board and management that such governance failures would not be tolerated, and that institutional accountability was imperative. Cameron's personal and professional downfall was swift and decisive. The board terminated his position as junior executive and barred him from assuming any future executive roles within the industry, citing breach of fiduciary duty and gross mismanagement. Shareholder lawsuits named him individually, seeking restitution for losses stemming from his decisions. His reputation, once shielded by family connections, was irreparably damaged. His network within corporate circles contracted rapidly under the weight of these judgments. The industry's response was a stark reminder that privilege alone offers no immunity against documented professional failure and legal accountability. At the corporate level, Whittaker Solutions entered an extensive leadership overhaul. The crisis exposed systemic weaknesses that demanded comprehensive reform. New executives were brought in with mandates to strengthen compliance frameworks, reinforce contract oversight, and rebuild client trust. The company lost several key clients permanently, accounts directly managed under my stewardship, which signaled the long-term impact of the operational disruptions triggered by Cameron's misjudgments. These client defections underscored that professional competence and reliable systems management are invaluable assets, not expendable costs. As part of the settlement, I negotiated not only financial compensation, but also ownership rights to the intellectual property embedded in the proprietary client database. This transfer represented a recognition of the unique value and custodianship I maintained over the system's architecture and data integrity. Additionally, I received stock options in Whittaker Solutions, cementing a stake in the company's future and aligning my incentives with sustainable business success. These terms elevated my professional standing within and beyond the company, reflecting a validation of expertise over entitlement. Industry observers and forums quickly recognized the case as a precedent in corporate governance and employment law. It became a reference point in discussions about the importance of strategic documentation, contractual literacy, and the nuanced role of technical stewardship in client management. Analysts highlighted how the case exposed the dangers of underestimating institutional knowledge and how legal protections, when systematically understood and enforced, serve as vital safeguards against reckless corporate restructuring. Throughout this phase, I maintained a professional demeanor focused on constructive engagement rather than vindictiveness. My communications emphasized lessons learned and the importance of measured, evidence-based approaches to resolving disputes. I participated in conferences and industry panels, sharing insights into how meticulous documentation and contractual awareness can empower professionals facing similar challenges. The narrative shifted from personal conflict to systemic reform, reinforcing the value of professionalism and strategic patience. Despite the significant judgments and reforms, the situation remained dynamic. Whitaker Solutions continued to navigate the complexities of rebuilding client relationships and restoring operational stability. The legal and regulatory aftershocks required ongoing attention and collaboration from corporate governance experts, legal counsel, and operational leaders. My role evolved toward advisory functions, where my expertise and custodianship of the client database enabled me to influence positive organizational change. This extended process underscored that professional vindication is rarely instantaneous. It demands endurance, strategic rigor, and a commitment to principled action. The case reaffirmed that documented expertise and contractual protections are powerful tools, not only for individual recourse, but for upholding standards across industries. Cameron's downfall and the company's penalties served as a cautionary tale, illustrating the tangible consequences of neglecting professional competence and legal frameworks in corporate decision-making. The $12 million award and the $50 million regulatory fines were milestones, not endpoints, in a broader narrative about accountability, governance, and the critical role of measured professionalism. The industry impact continues to reverberate, influencing how executives and employees alike approach the intersection of operational stewardship and legal responsibility. For me, the outcome validated years of disciplined work and prepared me to contribute meaningfully to the next chapter in corporate client management and governance reform. Today, I lead a consulting firm specializing exclusively in client data management and revenue assurance, a niche I developed and mastered during my tenure at Whitaker Solutions. This transition wasn't accidental. It was the direct result of years of accumulated expertise, a deep understanding of proprietary systems, and a rigorous approach to contractual governance. My new role grants me not only greater professional autonomy, but also aligns with my core competencies in managing complex client portfolios and safeguarding critical business assets. Financially, the move has been advantageous. My current earnings exceed my previous salary at Whitaker Solutions by approximately 30%, reflecting both the market value of specialized knowledge in this sector and the premium clients place on reliable, risk-mitigated account stewardship. Beyond salary, I hold equity stakes in the firm, a structure that rewards not just billable hours but long-term value creation and strategic growth. This equity ownership also offers me a direct voice in corporate decisions and strategic direction, opportunities I was systematically denied under Whitaker's hierarchy. Equally important is the balance I've achieved in my work schedule. Unlike my demanding, often unpredictable hours managing high-stakes accounts under intense internal politics, my consulting practice operates on a more sustainable timetable. I've structured client engagements to prioritize efficiency and meaningful impact, leveraging digital tools and process automation to maintain service quality without sacrificing personal time. This balance has enriched my professional satisfaction and personal well-being, allowing me to maintain the discipline and focus that define my approach. The $12 million settlement awarded in my case provided not only financial security, but also formal recognition of my professional value and the contractual protections I carefully negotiated years ago. It underscored that measured patience, comprehensive documentation, and legal literacy are critical components of career resilience, especially in environments where power dynamics can shift abruptly and arbitrarily. The legal victory was accompanied by transfer of intellectual property rights for the proprietary client database, ensuring that I retained custodianship of the system architecture and the data integrity protocols I devised. This is not just symbolic. It guarantees that my expertise remains integral to ongoing client management strategies, whether through direct consultancy or licensing agreements. Reflecting on the ordeal, I am reminded that professional reputation and competence are assets that require vigilant protection. Cameron Whitaker's dismissal of both nearly cost Whitaker Solutions a substantial portion of its revenue base and exposed the company to regulatory penalties exceeding $50 million. My strategic response hinged not on emotional reaction, but on a methodical application of contractual rights, technical knowledge, and legal guidance. This approach transformed a potentially career-ending humiliation into an opportunity for professional validation and industry leadership. The industry at large has taken notice. My case is now frequently cited in corporate governance forums and legal discussions as a benchmark for how documented expertise and contractual clarity can shift power balances in corporate disputes. I've been invited to participate in panel discussions, workshops, and advisory boards, where I share insights on the intersection of client data stewardship, contract enforcement, and strategic patience. These engagements reinforce a broader shift away from impulsive conflict towards systematic, evidence-based professional accountability. While the $180 million client revenue stream I once managed remains a critical benchmark, my focus has evolved beyond mere figures. I prioritize sustainable client relationships, risk mitigation, and adaptive governance frameworks that anticipate rather than react to organizational change. This strategic orientation not only protects revenue, but also enhances client trust and operational resilience in an increasingly complex business environment. Ultimately, this chapter of my career affirms that true professional strength arises from preparation, documentation, and measured action. The lessons learned extend far beyond my personal experience. They speak to any professional navigating hierarchical challenges, corporate politics, or rapid organizational shifts. Maintaining a calm strategic posture, grounded in contractual and technical expertise, enables one to turn adversity into leverage, protecting both career trajectory and industry reputation. In this ongoing journey, I remain committed to elevating standards for client data management and corporate governance, ensuring that expertise is recognized, contractual rights are upheld, and professional dignity is preserved. The strategic calm I displayed that night at the Halloween event was not an isolated moment, but a reflection of a career-long ethos, one that continues to guide my work and define my contribution to the field.